Hey everybody, this is Lisa Scott and welcome to my channel, Permission to Live in the End with Lisa Scott. And today I want to jump right into a story, but first, as you know, I like to share a Neville Goddard quote. If you are dissatisfied with your present situation, the only way to change it is to take your attention away from that which seems so real to you and rise in consciousness to that which you desire to be. You cannot serve two masters. Therefore, to take your attention from one state of consciousness and place it upon another is to die to one and to live to the other. That is incredible. And I wanted to share a story just real quick of a time years ago. This is pre-Neville Goddard, where my husband and I were in a situation where we needed to move out of an apartment, and we had just had our second, or was going to have our second child, so I was pregnant at the time. We lived in an apartment. My husband was the only one working. Suddenly, my landlord, our lease was about to be over, and our landlord needed the apartment. He was going to be moving in because he was going through something in his marital circumstance. And so at the time, it was imperative for us to move out of the apartment that we were in, but we had no down payment for a new apartment. We thought at least we would be able to stay in the apartment we were currently in because, just for a little while, maybe a month-to-month scenario or whatever. But that was out of the window once the landlord said he needed to move in because of his circumstance. And so I was the only one working. We had no deposit. There was just all kinds of scenarios stacked up against my husband and I at that time. And he was, scared, frustrated, and so was I. And being in a pregnant state, of course, you don't want to, well, it doesn't matter whether you're pregnant or not. You don't want to be in a state of being frustrated constantly. But being in a frustrated state, or, feeling anger or whatever you're feeling when you're pregnant, is even that much worse because you don't know how it's going to affect your child. So anyway, I had come to a place where not knowing what to do. I had no idea what to do. I was just, and then watching my husband be just as frustrated was just as scary, because he doesn't know what to do. You don't know what to do. And it's like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? So anyway, there was one day where I was just so completely done, like so completely not able to tolerate the feelings that were going on inside of my body because they were so, not good, that I said, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I cannot remain in this state. Now, again, this is pre-Neville, which is, I've said in another video, it doesn't matter. It's awesome if we come across Neville Goddard teachings, but you are also functioning this way regardless of whether you come across his teachings or not. But I appreciate having come across his teachings to confirm that what he is saying is the truth. So anyway, I had come to a place where I decided I could no longer take the feelings that were going on inside of my body. And I decided in that moment that I was going to go off to sleep, and by the time I woke up, I was no longer going to feel what I was feeling. I was going to no longer feel that. Now, prior to making that decision, I'm just now remembering that I had been looking at my local newspaper and going down a list of apartments. I had a composition. I was going to pull out a notebook. I had a composition notebook where I was keeping track of the apartments that I would call and schedule or talk to the person who was the renter, the person who was going to be doing the renting. I had a composition notebook where I would write whether or not I had spoken to someone regarding this apartment so that I could keep track, because there were so many apartments and I needed something to keep track. So I would write in this composition notebook, and I would, after having a discussion with the landlords and telling them what our scenario was, I would write down what their response was. And there was so many no's. Well, not so many. There were a number of no's, though. No, no. So anyway, after making the decision that I could no longer tolerate the feeling that was in my body, deciding that I was going to go off to sleep, and when I wake up, I wasn't going to be feeling this way anymore, all of a sudden I start hearing instruction directly from myself. And the first instruction that I heard was to go to the notebook where I had been, tracking my information, and tear out every page that had no on it. That was the very first instruction I heard. So first of all, it took me off guard that I was hearing, or that I was consciously aware of the instruction that I was hearing. But at that point, I figured I have nothing to lose but to listen to this instruction. So I went through my book and I tore out the pages that said no. Then the next instruction that I heard was go into your notebook, put your finger on the page, scroll down, and I'm going to show you where to stop. So I took my finger, put it on the page, scrolled down, and stopped on an apartment that was in a location that my husband and I never went to. It was called Brigantine, New Jersey. We never went in, never went out of Brigantine. And there's only one way in and one way out of Brigantine. But we had never been there. So there was absolutely no reason, as far as I was concerned, to believe that we were going to be there at all. I mean, I don't even know why I wrote it in my notebook. I guess because I was so desperate at the time that I wrote any apartment that was available. But this is what happened. So I put my finger on that particular apartment. Now, what I had also heard as part of my instruction was that the person that you end up speaking to about this apartment that you're about to move into is not going to bat an eye when you tell him about your current situation, that you are not working and you don't currently have a down payment. They're not going to bat an eye about this. And that person, the landlord, is going to have something in common with your husband. This is what I heard, guys. So I'm like, okay, all right. So anyway, I go to pick up the phone to schedule an appointment with this landlord. And he gives us a time and date to come. I didn't discuss at that point in time, what our full scenario was. We decided we were going to just go, and just let the chips fall where they may. So my husband and I go, we meet up with, a gentleman. His name was Billy. And we start having a conversation with him after we tour the apartment. And we start to discuss what our current scenario is. I'm not currently working, that whole nine. He doesn't bat an eye. Anyway, remember, I'm pregnant at this time. We had been walking around the apartment. It was for me, I needed to go sit down. So I went and sat in the car. And I must have been sitting in the car for about 15, 20 minutes when I realized, where's my husband at? What's going on? Why is he not coming back out? I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? So anyway, here comes my husband, and he comes walking out with, the landlord, or Billy. And he ends up telling me that him and Billy were talking boxing. So I'm like, this is the gentleman. This is the scenario. This is it. So anyway, Billy says to us that he has other renters, possible renters that he scheduled appointments with, and that he would get back to us after the weekend is over, or sometime during the weekend. But he said that he had had other he had had other interviews that day, but he had gotten in the car and left at the same time we left. So we were like, oh my goodness, what a wonderful sign. We started feeling the pressure lifting off of us in terms of what was going to happen. And anyway, as the days go by, we're not hearing anything from Billy. So I decide to call and ask what's going on. And he says, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is unfortunately good news for me, possibly bad news for you, basically. And he says that another family who needed to get out of their home like ASAP, they not only offered him the amount that he was looking for, but they offered him more money than he was looking for the apartment, and they were going to give it to him in cash. And he was struggling with this because, and he said this directly, I like you guys better. I like you. You know, he really jived with us. So I hung up the phone, and immediately that instruction started to come back. Remember that the person that you're going to, get into this apartment with, they weren't going to bat an eye, and they were going to have something in common with your husband. And when I remembered that, I realized not to let his words bother me, that he didn't even realize that we already had this apartment. So not to let it bother me. So I didn't. I decided to stick with what my instruction was at that time. And I don't know if it was a day later, or I think it was a day later or later on the same day. Phone rings. My husband is on the phone with someone. They're laughing it up, having a good time, whatever, laughing it up, having a great time. And I'm thinking, who is he talking to, My husband hangs up the phone with whoever he was talking to and says, that was Billy. We got the apartment. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to reread the quote that I started with in the beginning, so you can associate what I just said with what Neville Goddard is talking about. If you are dissatisfied with your present situation, the only way to change it is to take your attention away from that which seems so real to you and rise in consciousness to that which you desire to be. You cannot serve two masters. Therefore, to take your attention from one state of consciousness and place it upon another is to die to one and to live to the other. Thank you very much, guys, for stopping by and joining me here on my channel, Permission to Live in the End with Lisa Scott. And don't forget to press the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video.